and finish out these Civil War notes. We ended right about here, the Civil War amendments. Now, what I want you to do, the very first thing, pause this, get this down, but the very first thing after pausing it, okay, I want you to take and I want you to circle the word amend out of amendments. Remember, the Civil War amendments is how do we change what document to make sure that the injustices of the Civil War are now fixed and those men haven't died in vain. We have to change the Constitution. So there are 3 amendments that come from this. A lot of the times you will hear them as the Civil War amendments or the Civil Rights amendments because they give rights to those who did not have them before, African Americans in particular. So the first amendment we have is 13th Amendment. It abolished slavery. 14th Amendment granted citizenship to all people born or naturalized in the United States. I also want you to add another thing in here, and this might be a really good quiz question for tomorrow. It also gives equal protection. The 14th Amendment, I want you to write a little line out beside there. I want you to put equal protection to all. So you want to make sure that you understand that. And then the last one is the 15th Amendment, and this is definitely the most controversial one because one thing that absolutely had to happen for African Americans to have a voice in their political citizenship is they have to be granted, what's it called if you want the right to vote the fancy way? Suffrage. We have to enfranchise them. And so the 15th Amendment was granting African American, but here's the kicker, ladies, males the right to vote. So women's rights gets shoved to the side, and they did make 15th granted suffrage to African American males only, which was already upsetting a lot of people, but women were left out of this picture. You want an easy way to remember 13, 14, 15? This is what I say. Free citizens vote. 13 granted freedom, 14 citizenship, 15 allowed voting rights, but voting rights to who? Tell me. African American males. Circle the males. Now, the very next slide we have here is the expansion of presidential power. This is Lincoln. Pause it, get it down. All right, so one thing that we have to understand is in a wartime scenario, you almost always have an expansion of presidential power. The president has to be strong during the war. The federal government has to be strong. That's why in the War of 1812, remember the Hartford Convention didn't work out very well because you want the top of the triangle to be strong. Well, when Lincoln was elected in 1860, he found that the war required active and prompt presidential action during wartime. He said, we got to save the Union. Number one goal, save the Union. And so he does everything he can, including, what did you write down? You're writing down something right here. Okay. It says Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus. I want you to circle the writ of habeas corpus right here. Circle it, circle it, circle it. Because here's what I want you to add out beside that. The writ of habeas corpus is basically the right of someone to know why they are being held. The right of someone to know why they are being held. Okay? And so basically, if you lived in Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia, you could be locked up and you could never be told why. Lincoln's explanation for this, that's what you're writing down, is he says it's necessary to set aside small provisions of the Constitution during wartime in order to save the Union. This is extremely, extremely controversial because basically Lincoln is saying the Constitution, yeah, that's nice and everything, but it's war, so don't worry about it. This is going to be a little bit of a problem because if you are fighting a war for this country and its Constitution and ignoring the Constitution at the same time, people are going to have issues, okay? You want to know the real reason? Ooh, this would be a good quiz question for you tomorrow. You want to know the real reason Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus in D.C. and Philadelphia? That's the heart of the Union, is it not? He was looking for spies, espionage. And if you look later in American history, okay, you're going to notice that during World War I, we are going to have an espionage provision, and during World War II, we're going to lock away Japanese Americans in internment camps, even though they did nothing wrong. All looking for spies. Kind of interesting. Next slide. Pause it, get it down. Now, obviously you know what happens with Lincoln. One of the absolute well-known assassinations in American history. The death of Abraham Lincoln happens on April 14th, 1865 at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Now, one thing I want to kind of show you, if you look back take your notes, flip back to the very last slide of the Civil War where it says the Civil War ends at Appomattox Courthouse. What date was that on? Are you looking right now? You should be looking. The surrender by Lee to Grant was on April 9th, 1865. Lincoln is assassinated 5 days later. So one of the most unbelievably horrifying timings that I got for you. Vice President is Andrew Johnson. He assumes the presidency until 1868. Grant will be elected in 1868 due to his strong abolitionist loyalties. But that's basically what happens after Lincoln dies. Lincoln did see the passage of the 13th Amendment. However, the 14th and 15th Amendment will happen during this Reconstruction time period. Pause this one, get it down. All right, Reconstruction. Very last page here. Reconstruction. I want you to circle it and I want you to put an arrow out beside it. Do you know what it really means? It means to rebuild, okay? And at the top of the page, I said, I highly suggest you watch Crash Course number 2, Reconstruction. I am telling you right now, you need to watch it. Do it, take some notes, get some extra credit, but it definitely explains what I'm about to tell you in a lot more detail, and it'll be a lot better for you if you ever see a Reconstruction AP question, anything like that. But Reconstruction literally means rebuilding of the South. You're writing down 3 things: physically, emotionally, and politically. Okay? The South does not want to be part of the North. However, now it is again. So you have to mend those bridges. The first thing that we're going to see done is military districts are going to be created to help bring order to the South. You want to make sure you understand that. We are going to strong arm them with the military. We're going to force them to comply. Southern states had to write a new constitution, and they absolutely had to write the 14th Amendment into that constitution. You want to circle that one. And remember, what is 14, 13, 14, 15? Free citizens vote. Okay, citizenship. They have to give citizenship to all African Americans, anyone born or legal or naturalized on American soil. And the very last part is the South could never return to pre-Civil War status. They did not want the South ever becoming too strong again. There are a lot of things during Reconstruction that we're going to see kind of happen. Now, this slide is a little bit loaded, so I want you to pause it, get it down, and I want you to also note I added 2 things on this slide. At the very top, what is a carpetbagger? And then at the bottom, what is the Freedmen's Bureau? You're going to want to write that out beside this slide. Pause it, get it down. All right, so Reconstruction. Let's just talk about the 3 columns you're looking at. The first, rebuilding of the South, focused on social. There would be things called the Black Codes in the southern states that were intended to place limits on socioeconomic opportunities for blacks. These were passed by Southerners, and they were supposed to hold the blacks down. They also, to kind of counteract that, the North wanted public schools to be established in the South. But you know as well as I do, are the black schools going to be as good as the white schools? Not in a million years. But they did want schools in the South because you got to think about it. What are most of these freed slaves going to have the ability to become? Farmers. Well, they don't have the money to buy land, so what do they become? Here's something we need to add in down here. Most of them became, down here at the bottom, most freed slaves became what we call tenant farmers or sharecroppers. Tenant farmers or sharecroppers. You want to know what that is? It's essentially the African American is going to live on the land of the white person who used to own him, and he's just going to farm for his living. That's kind of sounding like slavery again, is it not? They're not going to make any excess money. They're just going to farm to live there. But that's the only opportunity they have. Now, political reconstruction of the South, the middle column. African Americans were elected to the House and the Senate. However, the military occupation is going to keep order, and then the Confederate leaders were punished. It's a nice philosophy, but one thing that's going to happen is you have to make sure that all African Americans have political voice, which means suffrage. And a lot of the times these black codes, or down here at the bottom, I want you to write Jim Crow laws, would be passed to keep African Americans away from the polls. And those Jim Crow laws included things like poll taxes, literacy tests, or even a grandfather clause that says your grandfather had to vote for you to be able to vote in this election. And could any of the slaves' grandfathers vote? Nope. So they were out. So that's going to be a little bit. You'll notice Reconstruction, they try and do good, but the South always counteracts it. And finally, the economical Reconstruction that's the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau was a group of people put in place to help freedmen. Freedmen would become sharecroppers. They were supposed to get, under the terms of Reconstruction, 40 acres and a mule. You'll want to circle that. But here's the deal. A lot of the times they didn't get it. They tried to diversify and educate the freedmen, but a lot of the times it didn't happen. Now, there were people, very last part of this slide, carpetbaggers. They were Northerners who came down to the South to profit off of Reconstruction. They tried to help freedmen, and sometimes they tried to help them out of the goodness of their heart. But to be honest with you, a lot of the times it was just because they wanted money. Okay, but these freedmen at the end of the Civil War, there were hundreds and thousands of former slaves. Freedmen is what we're calling them. Okay, but the only really opportunity they have is to become sharecroppers or tenant farmers. Now, Reconstruction will end. President Hayes is elected in 1876, okay, and he is going to sign the Compromise of 1877 that officially ends Reconstruction. Pause this, get it down. You don't have really very much to do, but I do want you to make sure you add in Rutherford B. Hayes as the president who signs it. While this ends Reconstruction, it has so many faults. First of all, I want to make sure you understand this. The Republicans would withdraw troops from the South. You want to know what's wrong with that? Arrow out beside it. You now no longer have order in the South, and you can't force the South to do anything. So yeah, you made them ratify the 14th Amendment. Does it matter if there aren't troops enforcing it? Nope. The South is going to do what they want to do. Have y'all ever heard of a saying called, "The South will rise again"? Yes? Normally, accompanied with somebody with a tattoo of the Confederate flag on their booty. That's what we're talking about. You take out the troops after Reconstruction, they're going to go back to doing what they've always done. You also had Republicans that had to support internal improvements in the South, but one thing that President Hayes did is he had to appoint one Southerner to the cabinet according to this compromise. But one thing I am absolutely positively going to have you circle. Big circle down here at the bottom. I'm going to look for it tomorrow. Also said that the civil rights was abandoned by the South and the North as it pertained to the South. Civil rights cases were dropped, and I want you to again write the code of laws that kept the African Americans away from the polls. The Jim Crow laws. I want you to write that down. I'm looking for it. Jim Crow laws. And remember, that's poll taxes where you had to pay to vote. Do any slaves or freedmen have money? No. Literacy tests. Can any freedmen, are they literate? Can they read and write? Nope. Or the grandfather clause. None of those freedmen's grandfathers could vote. So could they vote? No. And when the Republicans withdraw the troops from the South, the Jim Crow laws take over, the South will rise again becomes a real reality. Don't forget, I really highly suggest that Reconstruction crash course. Would be an easy extra credit and would be good for you. All right, I'll see you in class.